This is SILL TALKS, episode 2. Are you an architect or a creative? Or have you ever wondered what others do differently to constantly get jobs? Are you a small firm owner looking at ways to increase revenue? Or say you're a freelancer looking for strategies to carve a niche for yourself? If your answers to these questions are yes, then I say you are on the right show. My goal on this show is to provide you with the necessary information and resources to grow your business while focusing on doing what you love the most, which is creating. At the same time, building a business that is profitable and sustainable. My name is Leonard, and welcome to SILL Talks. This episode is titled The Designer's Guide to Negotiation. In this episode, we'll be taking a critical look at the phases of negotiation and how the designer can harness every stage, the steps to be taken while negotiating, such that the points pays the designer, and how to assess the designer's skills to make sure that what he is charging is worth it. What is negotiation? Simply put, negotiation is as natural to man as breathing. Negotiation is the process to which we get the things we want from people and making them see the reason why we deserve it. You look at negotiation, I say it is natural because we negotiate with ourselves all the time. You're thinking of the clothes to wear in the morning, how to dress, the food to eat. You're comparing two items, trying to make sure that you, in your mind, understand the reason why one is better than the other. So you see that negotiation, even though we don't see it as a major thing, it is a part of our everyday existence. You are negotiating with your peers in school, you are negotiating with your boss, you want the day off. Basically, we are always negotiating with one another. So when it comes to the business side of our practice, why is it that this skill, sometimes we have to hire a negotiator to now fill in the gap? Because we feel what we have in terms of the skills to properly broker a deal is not sufficient to earn us the points we want. In relating it to architecture and the business side of it, we are going to be looking at 3 broad outlines that has to do with negotiation and how the creative can harness his skills, or better still, sharpen his skills, and what needs to be done, the steps that needs to be taken for the designer to come out on top. So jumping in relating architecture and business, there are 3 phases of negotiation, and these 3 phases are categorized based on the planning as the initial stage, where you have the planning and preparation before the proper negotiation takes off, and then we have the proper negotiation itself, which is the bargaining, and then you have closing and implementation. Preparation and planning. Basically, what this stage entails is where the designer or the architect gathers background information. Here, you consider the value of the client, where you look at the ethnicity, you look at the culture of the client. You also consider the projected lifestyle, the client's goals, you assess the benefit of the project to see how to place the client, basically. And then under this preparation and planning as well, we have the second part of it, which is you assess your own strength. Now, as a creative, there's tendency for us to know where to place our own value, because it is the value we place at a service that the client ends up paying. So here, while assessing your strength, you identify what your own goals are, because it has to be able to go in line with the service you're providing with the client. That way, you are going to be delivering top-notch service at every time. Then you look at what are the leverages you have as an architect, what is it you have that the client needs? What is it you are offering? What is the service you're offering? What is it? Are you number one in that particular niche? Then you now look at it. How is it likely that the client will work with you? How highly placed is your brand? All of these questions will help you establish your worth as a service provider. Now, when we have done that, it means you have established how you are, and then you have kind of placed the client on a certain level to understand where the client is coming from as well. Then we move to the next phase, which is bargaining. In bargaining, basically, this is where all the cards are laid on the table. All interests are established to know which is most profitable for the project itself and which is most profitable or which is better for the client as well as the service provider, in this case, the architect. So first things first is the architect should learn to listen. Listening should be a part of the bargaining process from beginning to the end of it. The architect should learn to listen. And the reason why the architect should learn to listen is you will need to listen to understand what the client wants. And when you listen well, you are able to ask the right questions if you are not sure. And because you are listening, you can tell what the client stands to gain from the project. You can also tell how much the client understands about the project when compared to what you understand about the project. In this particular case, if what you understand about the project, because you are a technical person, is much more than what the client understands, it will now be your duty to bring them to your point of understanding, that is educating them. And in order to successfully serve this client, you will need to know what they know. And if you know what they know, it will help you establish what you can give and then the minimum baseline you can go. And in doing this, you may also need to know exactly what the conversation is. In your head, you already know where the conversation should go, but you cannot put that forward first. You need to understand from the point of the client, and you can only achieve this by listening. After you have listened, you state your position. You need to keep in mind that it is not a win-lose situation. In order to successfully provide value for your client, you need to let them know what you are committed to giving in the project. It means that you need to let them know that you are being committed and you are invested to the project's success as much as the client's own. It is not a, us versus them battle. Rather, you need to let the client know that you are there to help, and they need to see that your primary goal is to help them achieve and harness the project the best way possible. And oftentimes, if clients trust you and if people trust you generally, there is a tendency for them to do more, give you more to do, and usually ends in a win-win situation. Most times, the people you are negotiating with are always going to come back to you if things end up well. That is one thing architects need to realize and know. And also, of course, you want to let the client know your baseline and the benefits of your service that will be given to the project. You will need to let them know that, establish your baseline. You need to let them know the value, the things you are bringing to the table. And at the end of the day, you win when your client feels satisfied with your proposal and the project takes off. That is when you actually win. Considering that you know your strengths, as I earlier discussed, you already know your baseline and you understand what client wants. One key advice at this stage, because you understand the project, do not be afraid to charge what you're worth. This is a part where most people always miss it, and it is very important because at the end of the day, because you are afraid, you know your worth, you have established the work involved in the project as well, but you are afraid that the client might not see it, and then you know, kind of shoot yourself in your foot by charging less. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I'll use the case of course, Render Like a Pro, which I happen to be a co-founder at. And there was a time we had a project to negotiate for. The clients called in and asked us, okay, I want to do this, and this. Can you put in a quote and let's see if it is something that I can afford? So we thought of it. As at the time, we were just starting out, but we realized that the client's work was actually a lot of work, and it is something that will take us XY amount of effort to achieve. Also, we also realized that we were going to have to buy some components, subscribe to some services to achieve the work. So we had established a baseline that we could not fall below. So what we did was we looked at it, we assessed the client, and we saw that could this client pay this amount? And the first thing my partner said was, what if the person just doesn't call back? But at some point, we had to tell ourselves, if the person doesn't call back, all well and good, we move. So basically, we quoted what we thought. We know the person was going to negotiate. So we put a fee, a certain amount, and we said, okay, if the person comes back, this is our baseline. So we put a certain figure to it. And we called in and sent the invoice to the client. Lo and behold, to our shocking realization, the client actually accepted without pricing. I know that it is a rare case, but that incident opened my eyes to the fact that if we had charged below what we gave as our project fee, the client would have paid it. So basically what it means that at the end of it all, this value you place on your service is what the client will pay if the client sees the worth in it. So this leads us to point number 4, and it says basically never bargain from a point of desperation. I cannot overemphasize this. When you bargain from a point of desperation, you tend to compromise too much, and then you end up with more work and lesser pay. And what this does is, in the process of doing the work, there is a little bit of snag on your part. You are a human being. You realize that this work is worth much more than I bargained for. And then you end up grumbling through the process and not enjoying it in creating the value. And there's no how. At some point, something will give because the pay is not as much as work. So the next one which is number 5 point in bargaining, is to work with specific numbers. If I tell a client that my fee is 10,350 naira, for example, what it projects basically is that this person has done this before, and somehow he has a method for calculating his fees, meaning that there is some sort of breakdown to how he charges, and by so doing, there's a tendency for them to be careful not to round it up to the nearest number, even though you would, of course, where your benchmark is, but at the same time, there is tendency for them to be careful because the figures are not exactly rounded. So they don't know why those figures are there, but sometimes they just trust the fact that, okay, this person has been doing this before, and so the person knows the reason, but they might want to cut down the price. But sometimes the fact that you are using exact figures, those decimals, put it there, let them see it. The client, oftentimes from experience, will be mindful of the figures rather than when you use an approximate rounded number. So, which takes us to the next point, which is number 6. You never start your price at the exact amount you intend to take for the job. Like the story I gave a while ago, where I explained how we established a benchmark for what would do the project for the client. Then we added what we felt if this client comes back to negotiate, this is a more comfortable setting for us. We can still take this and still be fine. So we added to it because we know that clients might come back and negotiate. And what this does is, if you think your service is, say, worth 20 naira, you sometimes will want to put it at, say, 35 naira. As most times, people will feel offended when you didn't respect them enough to come down in your pricing. People naturally will feel, you're you are just being proud. You mean you told me it is 20 naira and then you want to stick at 20 naira. But if, of course, you say 35 naira and then eventually you come down to 20 naira or say 30 naira, it's easier for them to feel, okay, he has tried as well, so I can also meet you at a point. Now, except when the client is a returning client and they already have a pricing standard from you. For example, we have at Render Like a Pro, when we do visualization per project, we already have a pricing model that we use. So each client that is coming back already knows this. It is only when you have a new client that you have to educate them anew. And one thing you need to be mindful of is that when you negotiate with your client, you are educating them about what you do. And as such, if eventually your deal is successful with that one client, when he or she is bringing referrals to you, there is a common, there's this common thing in our field. When referrals basically is where your work comes from, there is a tendency that education you have passed to that client will also be passed to as many referrals that come from them. So the process, you are always educating. In bargaining, you learn to listen, you state your position, that is the negotiation. Then you consider not being afraid to charge what you are worth. Then you never bargain from a point of desperation. Also, work with specific numbers and then never start your price at the exact amount you wish to collect. So with that, we come to the last, assuming you have done your negotiations properly and you have moved to the last phase of it, which is the closing. Now, closing basically most times is at the end of the negotiation, and the outcome of negotiations oftentimes cannot be predicted, but there are certain scenarios that can play out in every negotiation. And the first one is, it is either the client and the architect reach a zone of possible agreement, or the negotiations reach a dead end. And now, when you reach a zone of possible agreement and the parties still find it hard to agree, it is best to take a break and listen again. It takes us back to the beginning of bargaining. When you reach that, you realize that yes, we have a common goal, we have a common point. Here we can agree, but it's still hard to agree on a specific figure or the modalities of the work. It is best to take a break, step back, and then you listen and see where to compromise if need be. Then the second thing is that when both parties have a zone of possible agreement, what one can do is to employ a third party to help negotiate. This happens in big projects, not the small ones, but in big projects, some firms might want to call in a negotiator to help them cross the hurdle back and forth with the consultants as such. However, when there is a deadlock in the negotiations, meaning that both parties cannot agree, there is no way forward. It is best for the architect to walk away. From experience, I realized that it is sometimes more profitable to walk away from certain clients because they can cause wahala. I must emphasize this. Yes, there are projects that are not meant for you. Honestly speaking, it is not every project that you go in to negotiate for that you win. Sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. But the good thing about it, one mindset the architect should always go into these negotiations with is the mindset of, okay, at the end of this, I want to be able to look the other person in the face and still have myself, self-worth, self-preservation. So like I said from experience that it's sometimes profitable to walk away from certain clients. The fact that they want to ever negotiate in the first place might be a warning sign for you that there might be too many more negotiations ahead in the project. Now, when a client tells you, let's negotiate, it may become an issue because it means every single item on your list eventually may become negotiable. Your scope of work, your timeline, even your agreed fees at some point will come back and be negotiated again. So for some people, they enjoy it and want to do it at every turn they get. Now, I'll say a quick story of how one of our negotiations failed, and then we moved on. We had a client who we had done a project for, so it wasn't a new working client as such. So we had proven ourselves worth. We had proven that we were capable hands to work on the client's project. The client knew that, okay, these guys could do it and do it efficiently. But in starting the phase 2 of the project, the client simply called us back to the table and said, this exact fee you charged when you were doing this a while back, say a couple of years back, is what I intend to still pay. And we looked at it and said, between then and now, we've grown in terms of experience, in terms of risk, and all of that. And in terms of size, we had grown from where we were when the client met us to a different kind of practice, sort of we were standardizing at the time. And we told the client, we are sorry, this is not going to work. As of that time, we had done the design and we were supposed to be supervising the project, which was, of course, the larger bulk of the work. But as at that time, we simply just explained that we couldn't take on that fee because it was too small. And one thing we were aware of was the fact that if you took it, there is a tendency for you to be in that loop, that circle of always, settling. And we needed to tell ourselves we were better than that fee at the time. And I tell you that experience taught us in different ways that there is not one way to the market square. You are a creative, you are an architect. Projects will come. You will find your circle that are ready to pay what you are worth. Now, most of the successful projects we have today, at SILL Designs and Render Like a Pro, are the ones where the client trusts us enough to pay what we have both agreed and not go back on rigorous process of crushing the fee, because from inception they already know the value and benefits of working with us and what we bring to the table. So a quick recap of what we have talked about. We said, in the first stage of negotiations, I have spoken so long that I have almost lost myself in the process. So a quick recap, before we end this particular episode. If you have further questions, you can leave them at the comment section, and then we can take it up and pull strings of the conversation to see where it leads us. So quick recap. First phase of negotiation, we talked about the planning and preparing, where you gather background information and then your client, as well as assessing your strength. Then we talked about the next one, which is where you listen, under bargaining, where you listen, then you state your position. You are not afraid to charge what you're worth. You will never negotiate from a point of desperation, and you try as much as possible to use specific figures. Also, I explained why it is best to bargain from a figure higher than the exact amount you are willing to take, and also why you should not be afraid to walk away if the negotiation phase. So guys, there you have it. My tips for negotiating for designers. The best way to come out on top is to evaluate your situation, as there are many and different characters and different clients. You see how best you can apply these tips or strategies to create a win-win situation for yourself. I know we have had different experiences, so please kindly leave your comments and share your stories with us. Let us know how you have developed a strategy that works for you in negotiating. Drop your comments. Tell us your stories. I cannot overemphasize this. It is very key that architects learn from experiences of the others. Your case, your client is peculiar, and how you've been able to resolve that might be a pointer for someone else coming to help in resolving their own issue. This is SILL Talks. Till the next episode, I am your host, Egbenyon Leonard, and remember that architects are in the business of creating housing solutions for our clients.